how can pornography impact you, your loved ones, and the world around you? Discover the answer for yourself in our free 3-part documentary series, Brain, Heart, World. In 3 30-minute episodes, this docuseries dives into how pornography impacts individuals, relationships, and society. With witty narration and colorful animation, this age-appropriate series shines a hopeful light on this heavy topic. In each episode, you'll hear from experts who share research on porn's harms, as well as true stories from people who have been impacted personally by pornography. Stream the full series for free, or purchase an affordable screening license at brainheartworld.org.
My name is Garrett Jonsson, and you're listening to Consider Before Consuming, a podcast by Fight the New Drug. And in case you're new here, Fight the New Drug is a non-religious and non-legislative organization that exists to provide individuals the opportunity to make an informed decision regarding pornography by raising awareness on its harmful effects using only science, facts, and personal accounts. We want these conversations to be educational, uplifting, and hopeful as we sit down with experts, influencers, activists, and people with personal accounts. We cover a wide variety of topics that may be triggering to some. You can refer to the episode notes for a specific trigger warning. Listener discretion is advised. Today's episode is with Ashlynn Mitchell. Ashlynn heard about Fight the New Drug years ago and has been a fighter ever since. Her and her former partner experienced firsthand how pornography can disrupt couple intimacy and relationship harmony. During this conversation, we talk about what it means to be the buffalo, betrayal trauma, and the importance of self-care. With that being said, let's jump into the conversation. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Consider Before Consuming. As we start the conversation, Ashlynn, I think the first thing is going to be to let our audience know how awesome you are. And so the first question is, can you explain that?
Can I explain the awesome?
Yeah. Can you explain your level of awesomeness?
Oh, man. I don't feel awesome, but I'm plugging away every single day, and that's all I can do. So, yeah, I have been through lots of hard stuff, like lots of us have, and just choose to find the resilience in me to keep moving forward and not let it define me, not let it label me, and to show up as me.
One sentence that I think explains your level of awesomeness is the following. It's that you're an advocate for women who want to live a life full of adventure and freedom. And I stole that from your podcast description.
Thank you.
And as I was reading it, the 3 words that stuck out to me were advocate and adventure and freedom. And I think the word adventure is kind of the first word that I want to talk about. And one of your recent adventures was Iceland.
Yes.
Can you talk about how awesome and fun that was?
Oh, it was magical, and we let it be magical. And we shared that it was magical because it really was. And it was planned by my friend because I told her first that we were getting divorced, and she saw me fall apart. She saw the worst parts, the sadness in me. And so she said, you need something to look forward to, and it needs to be awesome. So she picked Iceland, and I don't think any of us realized how meaningful it would be, but if you've been to Iceland, then you understand. It is just full of adventure and just power. The earth is completely changing the entire time that you're there. So we got to go and see the live active volcano and land, right next to it in a helicopter.
Oh, really?
It was so many conflicting emotions all at once. We were all just crying. Like,
could you see the lava?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
We were so close. And you've seen that stuff on TV, but it is very different in person.
Right.
I did not realize that. We hiked on glaciers. We swam in glacier water.
Did you? So
Yeah.
you got in the ice water?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were wearing dry suits, but
Okay.
we went all the way under. It's still freezing.
Wow.
But we did lots of Wim Hof and jump in the cold and
cool.
then Lots of hot springs.
I've been to Iceland. My
Yeah.
wife and I went to Iceland. It's the only place in Europe that we've ever gone. And we slept in a van,
Man,
like a little tiny van. Like I could barely fit in the back.
really?
And we just, we're mainly on like the southern side of Iceland. Mm-hmm. Is that where you guys?
We did the full island,
Oh,
and
you
we still
did?
missed a lot. We were there 10 days.
And it's almost like a European country that's overlooked.
Yes.
Sometimes, where it's like, I want to go to Italy, I want to go to all these places in Europe, but I think Iceland, man, it's just like going back to that word adventure, it's a country full of potential adventure.
Yes, and you don't have to be active. I had a lot of people reaching out saying, okay, do I have to be in shape to go there? And I'm like, no, you can still go and sit in the hot springs.
Yeah.
And it's still adventure because they're everywhere. You can go hike on a glacier and it's not that difficult, but it's exciting.
Right.
And it was a very different trip because we had so much intention behind it.
So it was like a girls' trip
Yes.
with intentionality.
Yes. So it was called a divorce trip, but the friend who planned it, Jordan, she's happily married, but she knew. And that's what was beautiful to me is she showed empathy without saying, hey, I know what it feels like. She could see, I see my friend in pain and I want to be there for her. And that's something that she could do.
Yeah, that's neat. Friends, man, it's important.
Oh yeah, that support. And we don't even live, she's in New York City. So we would just talk over Marco Polo.
Yeah, that's cool. Speaking of friendship, going back to your podcast, episode 2 is about friendship.
Yeah, that was with Jordan.
Yeah, I knew that. I listened to that episode as I prepared for the conversation today. The first episode I listened to was Be the Buffalo.
Yes.
And one of the biggest takeaway from that, if I had to break it down into one sentence, and I steal the sentence from you again, the sentence is same storm, but 2 different stories.
Yes.
Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. So imagine a storm coming over a mountain, and cows, when they see a storm, they run away from it. They turn and run. But cows are slow, and so the storm catches up with them. And instead of them running away from the storm, it just stays with them so much longer because they're slow. Whereas when a buffalo sees the storm coming, it faces it and it runs into the storm. And because it is running into the storm and the storm's going the other way, their pain is shortened. And so they're still experiencing the discomfort of the storm, but it's quicker. And so the whole idea is, yes, it's the same storm, but it's how we choose to face our storms. And it's not that you even have to run into it and charge it. I think it's really just face it.
Yeah. I think it reminds me of a term called like a psychology 101 term that's learned helplessness. And I think the cow, as they run away from the storm, they're experiencing a little bit of like helplessness, where the storm's going to hit them. Like you said, it's inevitable.
Yeah.
But I think as you're talking about the difference, it's about perception, it's about facing it instead of feeling helpless.
Yeah, and I like that. And I think the buffalo, they see the hope. They see that there's light after the storm that they're facing.
So do you consider yourself to be the buffalo or to be the cow?
I have been both. I'm currently the buffalo. I feel like I've been the buffalo for probably the last 8 years. But before that, for sure, I was stuck. I felt helpless. And I kind of just ignored the storm that was all around me and never went away. But I just pretended and, pushed it down.
When I rode my bike across the United States, I rode through Kansas and then I rode into Colorado. So I went from the plains of Kansas into the Rockies. And I think that's one of the places you can really observe the difference between cattle and buffalo is right in that area because cattle are on the plains and then the buffalo are in the mountains. So if I imagine and put myself in that position, I imagine that there's this moment between the stimuli, like the cow or buffalo seeing the storm, the stimuli, and then the response. And in that moment, it can be a short moment where you have this decision to make. And you said that you have been the buffalo for the past 8 years, but before that, you were experiencing more of the reaction that the cow would give.
Oh, yeah.
My question is, can you talk about that moment between the stimuli and the response? because I think some of our listeners could benefit from your perspective on this, because it's possible that some of them right now are in that moment where they have experienced a stimuli. And since we're talking to you and you've talked, I think we'll get into it more, but often you talk about betrayal, trauma. So let's kind of focus in on that stimuli.
Okay.
Experiencing betrayal, trauma, and then the moment of response, that moment between those two things. What advice do you have for someone who has experienced betrayal, trauma, and is in that moment currently? Like, how am I going to respond?
Yeah. Well, and do we know what betrayal trauma is? A lot of us have never even heard. I'd never heard it. When I was the cow and really just trying to numb, I really took on everything. So this must be my fault that my former partner is choosing these things. It must be my fault that I'm angry and acting this way. And I didn't understand why I was showing up the way I was, but I did choose to be really angry and name call and bring up the past in closed doors.
Do you think it was a subconscious decision?
Yes, because the crazy thing is we are not taught to act this way. And yet, how many of us show up this way? Most all of us. And we all show up in this pain, and we will yell and scream and do things that are not us and leave the room and go, what did I just do? This is not me. So I feel like that being in that response, I was not choosing to be me, and I didn't even realize it. I just was confused and didn't know why I was showing up the way I was. So for me, the first step was actually my former husband. He saw an ad and realized, okay, maybe I actually have a problem here. You know, he was using pornography, regularly since he was 7, but it wasn't on the daily. So he's like, it's not an addiction. It's not a huge problem, but it was absolutely affecting his life and mine. And so when he started to kind of look into things, I started to learn and educate myself. We asked for help. So for us, I think it started with just a little bit of education to realize we could name something that we were feeling, and that we did have a problem, both of us, that we had a lot of different feelings wrapped around it and a lot of wounds, and that we needed to ask for help. And so that's what we did. We didn't just try to do it on our own. I think facing the storm doesn't mean I'm going to just do it all by myself. I've never done anything by myself being the buffalo. I haven't. I've used so many different resources, and you guys have been one of them. Having resources and the documentary to show my kids and help them make better choices, all of these things.
I think that's one of the common responses that we as humans want to go with, is that white knuckle. Like, let's white knuckle it and let's take this on by ourselves because we need to be independent. We have to do this ourselves. We have to be strong. What benefits did you see from seeking help?
Well, so the white knuckling to me, for me and for my former partner, was shame. We were just so ashamed that this was actually our marriage, that this is how we were showing up as individuals. We felt very alone. And because we weren't talking to anyone, it was just our own little secret, it felt so heavy and lonely, and that helplessness, right?
Yeah.
And so I think choosing to step into that and to say, okay, I'm going to ask for help, we're going to face these things, was so scary. But we started to recognize how much shame we'd been living in. I actually had my therapist at the time, she said, you really need to take a shame resilience course. And it's based off Brene Brown's material. And I said, I don't need a shame resilience course. I'm super confident. I've had success in all my businesses. I'm good. And she said, just sign up for the course. She knew, she could see right through me. And I got in there, and week 1, I just fell apart. Like, okay, my whole life I've been living in shame, and I didn't know how to name it, but I was showing up that way by protecting someone who was hurting me and not saying, hey, I need help. I'm important. I'm worthy. And even if he had chosen to do nothing, I'm still worthy of healing my heart.
Yeah. I think it's cool that you talked to that lack of self-awareness for a moment with was it your therapist? where you're like, no, I'm good. I got this. We kind of want to, we going back to that white knuckle or take it on ourselves it's challenging to have that self-awareness to be able to.
Well, and we
seek help.
want to present ourselves like, we got this. I'm doing great. Look at me.
Yeah.
And it's maybe part ego in me, but I'm not doing it consciously. I'm just trying to protect myself and other people's opinions.
Yeah.
And so to let that go was really scary, but it was also freeing to name it.
Yeah. I love that you, as you talk to the difference between the cattle and the buffalo, you talk about how you used to respond in that way, and now you're responding in this way, and it's been 8 years, you said?
Yeah.
What do those 8 years represent? Is it a lot of work?
Yes. And it's every day. It's choosing. And so sometimes I can say that and people feel helpless, like hopeless, like this is really going to be the rest of my life. But it's not hard once you this, once you learn how to start taking care of yourself, how to really put your own needs before, instead of putting them last, you start to realize that it's not as hard as it sounds. In the beginning, yes. I feel like the first 8 months for us was like heavy duty. We are putting all our efforts into healing. And after that, it's been just a curious and open heart and choosing to self-reflect instead of immediately react and, project our feelings on other people. And we still make mistakes, but yeah, choosing every day to say, hey, I'm going to face my storm of today. And it might be really small and it might be big.
Yeah. It reminds me of cleaning a wound. Like you said, the 8-month period, it's a little bit different for everyone.
Yeah.
Right. But that first 8-month period is uncomfortable and yet healing.
Yeah. It was uncomfortable. And I was a little bit still resentful. Like, I'm here because of you, and I didn't want to take any responsibility for how I was showing up. But I got the validation that I need and the support, and then could move on and say, okay, let's just live my life. And the truth is, we got divorced. Kobe, my former partner, chose to leave in January, and I don't regret, and neither does he, the last 8 years. And so we did work our, storms together and recovery work together. And we don't regret it because we really were doing it for our own healing. And so now, separate, we can still do the same thing.
Well, I am all about being loyal to the absent, and your former partner's not here with us. But I did want to ask you a question, and you can talk to it as much as you want to, or not at all if you want to. And the question is regarding a quote from the Gottmans. I'm sure you've heard it. Maybe you don't have it memorized, but I do because I read it a lot. And the quote is that they say, "We are led to unconditionally conclude that for many reasons, pornography poses a serious threat to couple intimacy and relationship harmony." And so the question that I want to pose to you, and at the same time be loyal to the absence since your former partner's not here, is, did porn consumption disrupt the intimacy and relationship harmony between you and your former partner?
Absolutely.
I think that I do want to say too that I'm not trying to blame it all on pornography consumption, right? We're not doing that. I'm just saying, was that one of the things?
Yeah, it was one of the things, and he can say the same thing. It was never just one thing, right?
Right.
And he learned to cope in that way at a very young age, and it wasn't really talked about in his household. And when we got married, we thought, hey, it's going to go away. And it just didn't. And so it created some fractures in our marriage with trust, with me feeling safe, with me feeling chosen. And some of that, not feeling chosen and not feeling enough, those are wounds that I did bring into the marriage that I didn't realize. Like, I had those in my youth, and then I found someone who really nailed that in the coffin for me.
Right.
And he actually has very similar wounds that we both came in and found that familiar feeling with each other. And so he worked so hard to find sobriety for himself. And it did disrupt in other ways, emotional affair, physical affairs. And he's been able to. I think he just celebrated his on July 12th. I text him, congrats on another year. I don't even know how many years. We don't keep track, but 8, 9, I don't know.
That's awesome. Well, speaking about storms that you've had to face in your life, you mentioned that one of the most recent ones was your divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never been through that. And if I try to put myself in your shoes, I feel like I would have a challenge not experiencing bitterness and resentment.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, and I think that, again, talking about value, I think that this is a valuable conversation for our listeners. Are you still in that space? Can you talk to that? Like, are you still experiencing some bitterness and resentment? Or how'd you get past that?
Oh man, I have worked so hard, Garrett, to feel as good as I feel. Yeah. And I, of course, have bad days. But I have been through a lot of grief. So I can own that I'm really good at grieving. It is a learned skill that I did not have 8 years ago. And so when I learned how to start grieving, betrayal, and how to start grieving loss of family members, job loss, house, like so many different ways we can lose, right? And we have to grieve that. And so when we started this year, we were at our highest high. Things were never better. And so when divorce came into the picture, I went to my lowest low. And I had that suicidal ideation. It scared the crap out of me because I've never been there, never, ever. And I think it was just, I was at such a high that I fell so much further than had I been prepared and I saw it coming. And so the crazy thing is, in that day that it was horrible for me, my former partner came and just was with me. And he could still be there. I mean, he's still my best friend. We've been together 22 years, so you can't just immediately fall out of love. And he, kept me there, kept me safe, and reminding me, your brain is just not in the right place right now, and this isn't going to last forever. I woke up the next day and I called the doctor and said, I had, suicidal ideation yesterday. I need help. And of course, doctors right now are out months because everyone's feeling so many feelings, and COVID kind of screwed up all those appointments and things. And so they actually did get me in that week because it was more of a, life or death. I need help. And I did get on some medication and I've been able to slowly lower the dose as I've felt better. But I go to therapy regularly. I do what's called accelerated resolution therapy. And I do that because it is traumatic. It is a lot of grief to process. And I'm able to process on my own, so I don't necessarily want to go to talk therapy right now. But the reprocessing these wounds has really helped me find safety in moving forward in that uncertainty. And it's so scary. When all this happened, I was so hurt and so rejected. And all those old narratives from the betrayal trauma that I'd worked through, I'm not enough, I don't feel chosen, they all came back. And how can they not?
And amplified, probably.
Yeah. I mean, I think anyone who's been through divorce knows that feeling. And it's not that my former partner felt great. He was hurting too. So these two hurt people. And we have this other podcast that we were doing as a couple with a therapist, and to just let that go. And it was a lot of pressure on us to, people are saying, what's going on? Where is your partner? Are you guys getting divorced? And I'm in so much pain and trying to be boundaried and still try to run my business and saying, just like, how am I supposed to answer that? If I answer it truthfully, what do they say to that? It's not a great question. So,
and you're not even sure what the truth is right at that moment, right? You're still trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah. So in the beginning, I would say I wrote a post of like, this is how we're going to announce that we are uncoupling and divorce. And it was a little bit more angry and blaming on him because he chose this. And when I was able to really sit in it and work through my feelings, we did read a book that I would highly recommend called The Conscious Uncoupling. And it's just the best approach you can take for your kids' sake. And really, when we zoomed out, of course we're hurt, but our kids are in so much pain. And so when we were able to do that, I shifted, and it wasn't like overnight that I could say, hey, I don't have resentments, I'm not hurt. But it was months of saying, okay, I think I'm ready. So January is when he asked for the divorce. We announced it in May, which is still really soon. But I felt prepared. I'd done so much work. I even did therapy and reprocessing on sharing and being able to withstand the backlash, the hurt, the betrayal that many of our audience felt, that we didn't last. So yeah, we're in a very different place now. I don't look at it as failure. I chalk that up to my shame resilience class. I don't feel shame about what happened. It was hurtful for both of us, but I also have found new parts of me I didn't even know I had.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing all that, by the way. It's difficult to share our low moments. One of the examples, I guess something that I can use as a metaphor is when we're talking about discomfort, is that I enjoy getting in ice baths. And we talked about how you jumped into like a polar bear plunge into the ice waters in Iceland.
Yes.
And that discomfort that you can feel in the cold waters. And the thing that I want to relate here is that when I jump in an ice bath, I've actually taken a thermometer and like tested the water, see how cold it is. And sometimes it's in the winter and there's like a layer of ice, so I have to get a hammer and like break through the ice because it's outside.
Yeah.
And so it's like 38 degrees or so is the temperature of the water. And I jump in there and my first response is to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And I can relate it to suicide ideation a little bit. Because in the moment, my biological urge was get out of the water because it's too cold. And you have to intentionally stay in there. You have to deliberately be like, no, I'm staying in. I'm going to ignore that biological urge to get out. I'm just going to sit in the discomfort. And I just want to say I admire you for being strong enough to talk about that discomfort, and even stronger to sit in the discomfort.
Yeah, it was hard. And I asked for help in that moment. Took a lot from me to even text him and say, I need help. Because it's exactly what you're saying. Everything inside of me was saying, this is the better option. This will make everyone's life easier. But in my rational mind, I'm thinking, no, I've never thought that. And in fact, my youngest brother did take his own life. And so I have very strong feelings about suicide. And so that's why I think it shocked me that I was there.
Wow. I think that not only can we learn from this analogy in this way, but also if we're talking about following or like denying a biological urge, or how sometimes a biological urge can actually be detrimental. Mm-hmm. It's like we can relate it to turning to pornography. And this doesn't have so much to do with you, because from what I understand, you've never been a person who has turned to pornography on a personal level.
I have not.
Yeah.
Other vices.
But I think, that's like the biological urge says, turn to pornography or do this or that. And again, going back, our biological urges, sometimes they're unhealthy responses, like unhealthy signals.
Yes.
Like we don't have to follow them.
Yeah. And it takes some skill to say, okay, now what? If I can't do that, I don't want to do those things, what do I replace it with? Yeah. And you're a great example of that.
So are you. There was a lot of things that you just said that I'm like, man, this is very valuable and this is very valuable. One of the questions I have was, you used the word reprocessing wounds. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. So it's the type of therapy that I choose to do is taking a belief or trauma that I've had, and a lot of them are from my youth, but they're amplified right now as an adult, and saying, hey, I don't want to feel this way anymore. Especially if, I see my partner, I feel this specific feeling of I'm not chosen. I want to feel different about that and not have a physical response. And so I will go through, the therapist will walk me through kind of a script where I'm in my brain reprocessing that I am chosen. I always have been. And I really have fallen even, and it sounds so weird, but I've fallen in love with me more than I ever have.
That's cool.
And I know that a lot of it has been this reprocessing, and so that I don't see it in this negative way. It just was something that was part of our story and that hurt, but then I've been able to move through and really feel and cry it out, have all the hard feelings, send all the regretful texts that I did. And to just really say, okay, we're doing this. The best advice I took from this experience is I want to show up as a graceful woman and not a wounded child. I want to look back at myself in 5 years and not be filled with regret.
That's a good stance to have. I like that. So reprocessing, it reminds me of EMDR.
Yes.
Because that's one of the words in EMDR, that acronym is reprocessing, right?
Yes.
And so it kind of just sounds like you're perceiving the issue or you're perceiving the trauma in a different way. Mm-hmm. And it's similar to EMDR, but just in a different method, I guess.
Yeah. So EMDR, you're speaking it out loud. And so for me, I've done EMDR and it was fabulous. But if you are more like me, I might be very open and talkative, but I'm also not when it comes to things that are really hard to talk about.
Right.
And
we
personal.
all have that internal monologue.
Yes. And so it's already scary to be in an office with a therapist. And so with ART, you don't have to share a thing.
Oh, cool.
It's all in your brain. And you can just say, okay, I'm ready to move on. I'm not. So I share sometimes and I don't share.
Wow.
And that's really freeing. And ART was developed by a therapist who did EMDR and just saw okay, we can do this even better.
Oh, wow. That's cool. As I'm hearing you talk, I'm hearing like the different layers of grief. Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit about the moment between stimuli and our response, the moment when your former partner told you that he wanted a divorce, and then your response. And I remember following you on social media, and I remember you leaving town for a little bit of time and taking a moment to respond. I'm sure you had some initial response, but really gathering your thoughts and figuring things out. Was that good for you to have that little getaway?
Yes. And I know everyone can't do that. And it was definitely a privilege of mine to have my former partner just say, okay, go. And I just got a hotel room that they delivered my breakfast and my dinner and lunch. And I got back to my roots of, I just want to be alone and I want to hike. And I took a journal and I would just go hike and be alone in the Red Rock. And, it was February, so it wasn't super warm, but warm enough, and just cry. And I listened to that book, The Conscious Uncoupling, and would journal out my thoughts. So I found a lot of clarity there. That's part of the shift for me when I started to say, I can do better. Right now, I'm in so much pain and hurt, but I don't have to lash out and share that. I can process through this and make it through and be that graceful woman that I want to be. I feel like I lived my life letting life happen to me. And then I would blame and I would say it's, their fault and I feel this way because of them. But now I live my life saying I get to choose. And I'm showing life how I want to live.
It kind of goes back to the freedom.
Yeah,
right?
It really is.
The description in your podcast. The freedom. The opposite of freedom, I guess, the antonym could be confined.
Yeah. And you do. When you're in that place of life is happening to me, you feel controlled and it's chaotic. And so, I would do things to gain control back. I'm going to clean my house crazy and I'm going to work, overtime so that I have some control over my life. Controlling what my husband was doing. And really, it's the opposite that brings us freedom, not those things. And so to really say, hey, this is your choice and you get to choose. And this is my choice over here and I get to choose.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be your mom.
Right. It reminds me of like the two circles that have a little bit of overlap.
Yes.
And it's knowing what you can control, what others are in control of, and what you can influence. There's that little bit of overlap where we can influence certain things, but mainly the big portion is just what we have control over.
Yes. So it was more like, okay, so I'm not going to control, but hey, let's have some spoken agreements. Let's talk about it instead of ignoring this elephant that's deeply affecting us. Yeah. So that's what we learned to do.
That's awesome. Well, Ashlynn, we just want to say thanks because we find value in you and your life lessons, and we appreciate you showing up day in and day out. I want to leave you with the opportunity to have the last word. If there's something on your heart that you want to share with our audience, or maybe something that we haven't discussed that you think would be valuable.
I'm just going to reiterate to face that storm, whatever it is in your life, and to be the buffalo. And even though it's going to be hard either way. Whether you run away or push it down, numb it out, face it, it's not going to be as hard. There's so many resources to ask for help in whatever arena you're in. Ask for help.
Thanks again for being here, for showing up and
thank you.
Sitting down with us today.
Regardless of age, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religious affiliation, political persuasion, or any other diversifying factor, porn can impact anyone. If you've recognized the harmful effects of pornography in your life, or recognize the harms pornography can cause on society, we welcome you to become a fighter. As fighters, we strive to be bold, understanding, open-minded, and accepting. If you're ready to become an official fighter, we invite you to join the movement at ftnd.org/fighter. That's ftnd.org/FIGHTER. Join us in our fight for love by becoming a fighter today.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Consider Before Consuming. Consider Before Consuming is brought to you by Fight the New Drug. Fight the New Drug is a non-religious and non-legislative organization that exists to provide individuals the opportunity to make an informed decision regarding pornography by raising awareness on its harmful effects using only science, facts, and personal accounts. If you want to learn more about today's guest and the conversation we had, you can check out the links included with this episode. Again, big thanks to you for listening to this conversation. As you go about your day, we invite you to increase your self-awareness, look both ways, check your blind spots, and consider before consuming.